we can go with the options like something we know. When we say something we know, it can be a security question or like the password. For an example, some of the banking site have the two level of the password. One password for initial access, and then further, if you are going to do any kind of the profile changes, they ask me another level of password that is called profile password or something. So it can be a security question at the time of SSPR it is being asked, or it can be some further password. Something we have, it can be a mobile, it can be some device like earlier we used to have RSA tokens. Everyone used to carry it along with iCard. Nowadays, we do not notice people with that RSA token. Or it may be some software installed on your mobile like Microsoft Authenticator. Something you are means something you know, security questions, passwords, something you have like mobile or some specific hardware device, something you are, some biometric properties are being verified, like your fingerprint. You provided your fingerprint, and in place of the password, you log in. So it can be your MFA, multi-factor authentications, or like a face scan, depend on the device compatibility. So MFA enabled two-step verification. Along with the username, password, some additional information is being asked. So the purpose or intention of MFA is to help us safeguard the access to the data of the applications. I said that MFA is something which can be enabled from user page of Azure Active Directory. You go there, either you enable it or enforce it. Right? So that's the one way. Another way is we can enable it using another feature that is called conditional access. There we can use it based on certain conditions. If that's the case, then we go with MFA. Otherwise, MFA will stay out of the way of the user. So MFA is available free of cost for the users. But if you talk about conditional access, available under the license features. Settings also talked about, different settings are there. And then further we talked about Azure Active Directory conditional access. That's a feature or the tool available in a premium P1 and P2 license of Active Directory. We define the conditions. Based on the condition, it takes the decisions and enforce the organization policies. Right? We discuss, not sure whether I was audible that time or not, specific user using that application, trying to log in from a specific location. Based on that, we can define whether access should be allowed or should be blocked. It should be allowed in a specific case when that particular condition is met. That is something we can define. So by configuring conditional access, we can implement a right protection and we can ensure users are productive whenever or wherever. Why simple MFA might not be a good approach, good solution for some of the organization? I said that there may be some non-critical applications. Non-critical resources are there. MFA cannot differentiate. If we talk about a straightforward MFA, that cannot differentiate. Okay, I should perform MFA here or not there. So thousands of the users are there. For individual user, it does not make a major impact. But if you see the broad picture, 1,000, 2,000 users are there. Every time they are logging, even that is a non-critical, MFA is being performed. So somewhere it is making the authentication process slower. And in a broad picture, there may be a dent on the performance of the user. And that dent on the performance user can make impact on production, and impact on the production can make direct impact on the revenue. So we want our user to be productive, and we want to apply the right level of the security. So rather than going with the straightforward MFA, we can go with a conditional access. That's a tool, one tool used for the identity security. We apply the right access control. Whenever we need it, it will be there. Whenever it is not, it will stay out of the way of that user. Like I said, something non-critical. We define, we organize, we configure the policies in that way. Conditions we discuss, the different conditions can be there. Further, we talked about access review. Using that, we can ensure right access is given to the user. We can evaluate the policy. We can evaluate the access, whether that access is required for the user or not. Right? That all stuff we discussed. Further, identity production, there was a demo. Before I move on the next topic, let me just give you the quick demo. When we were on break, I created one instance, Active Directory instance. Let me log in there. Sign out, and here I'm signing in using that direct instance admin at my AZ-500 on Microsoft.com. That's one more Active Directory I created. And on that Active Directory, I enabled the trial license, the premium license. Admin at myAZ-500.onmicrosoft.com, that's a user account. myAZ-500.onmicrosoft.com is the tenant name, where I enabled the trial license using the similar method I told you. Go in a use license page, all product, and there I enable it. So last time we talked about dynamic group account was not available because I had a free edition of Active Directory. This option was grayed out. Now we do have that option. And when we went in a conditional access page under the enterprise application, we do have that page, or in a security as well, we do have a page. The options to create the policy was actually grayed out because we had no premium license. We do have that options available. Let me enable policy for one user account. Before that, I'm going to create one user account named as user1. User1 at myAZ-500. Let's go with the default user account only. Sorry, default password only. User1. I'm not granted any access. That's fine. Let me check it out, this user account. Can log in that right now this user can log in or not? Portal.azure.com. See here I said user1 at myAZ-500.onmicrosoft.com. myAZ-500. Password I copied, supplied here, changing the password to something like that. Log in here without any problem. And if I log in another application, let's say Office, portal.azure.com. office.com. User logged in on Office as well without any problem. That's a different thing. No subscription is visible. No rights has been given, but authentication is successfully done. And here as well, on Office also, on Office portal as well, this user has logged in without any problem. User 1 at myid 52. Let me just configure a conditional access policy for this guy. Going Active Directory. And here we do have the option. Going on security page or enterprise application page. Going to create a policy. Let's say policy 1. I'm going with a simple name. You guys are going to follow the naming convention being followed in your organization. You want to define for all users or specific users. It is highly recommended. Do not go with a block policy for all the users. Okay. If you are going to define that stuff, make sure you have added some users in an exclusion list, in an excluded list, so that you can use those users as a break class account. So, should not do for all users, all applications. Okay. If you are going with that, this is something I would say kind of mandatory, highly recommended, I would say. So right now I'm going to define it for selective users or groups. We can select the group account or a specific role as well. We can select the role assigned to any global administrator or any application administrator, user administrator. Certain security features should be enabled for. Okay, so I'm selecting individual user. There are just 2 users in my Active Directory, 2 employees only in that organization. So user 1 I'm selecting right now. In place of individual user, I could select the role. I could select the guest user accounts as well. Group account also I could select. So user 1, and here I can define the applications. All applications or specific applications. If you are going with all applications, make sure we define something in an exclusion list as well. So right now I'm going to define Azure portal. So Azure management group, I select it here. Can define other conditions as well. Device is compliant, user risk, user risk is on this level, low, medium, high. From that specific location, using that specific application, you can define that stuff. Using the browser, specific browser. Okay. Here I'm going to define the access. So application I define, browser, right? Portal.azure. You can block the access, allow the access. So let's say I'm going to allow the access, but post MFA. Let's get to work. Work again. Rise application, conditional access, new policies. Policy 01, 02, selected users, and then further for selective application. Here I said I'm going to define the policies for application which is known as Azure Management Application. Access, I'm going to allow access post MFA. We can set the policies in report mode, means it will not prevent the user, it will not do anything, but will keep the log of the job which we are doing and that falls in this particular category. Or you can enable it, disable it. You can create it as a template, later on I'll enable it, so you can create it in an off setting as well. Okay, enable MFA for portal.azure.com. At the same time, let me go and create a second person. You'll create allow rule or deny rule, means either you'll allow or deny, but conditional allow also you can just go with. See, we have been given a radio button, Kumar. Here we define that stuff, create policies. One policy is there right now. So you go with grant access. Here, when you allow that, like right now I selected this one. It means if user perform MFA, access will be allowed, unless it will be denied. So conceptually, it is the combination of allow and deny both. But these are the radio button. You cannot do with us like a same thing. You can go with the both things at one time. So this time I'm creating block. Earlier I created allow. This time I'm creating block. Define the policy name, policy 2, and for the same user I'm defining this. The policy is quite generic. Obviously, in your lab environment, in your production environment, you need to fine tune it more. So I created one policy named as policy 2 for the same user, user 1, and I block the access. But the application I'm going to select this time, that is the different application. That is Office. I'm going to block the policy. Block the access of user 1 this time. Last time user logged in on a portal without any MFA and log in Office as well without any problem. Allow it some time and then check it out the things. So 2 policies are there. And then let's check it out. Opening a private window one more time. Portal.azure.com. User 1 at my AZ-52 dot on Microsoft. Password. User login first time, so MFA has to be performed. Means we need to set, means this user 1 need to set the multi-factor authentication configurations. And after that, whenever user will log in on portal.azure.com, MFA will be performed. Same thing, whatever happened at the time of straightforward MFA. See here. Log in. Once it is done, we'll be able to log in. Next. Done. office.com. Last time user could log in there without any problem. With the user account now, user 1 at my AD52. So you do not have the permission to access this. While as there is no problem here. User login on portal.azure.com, MFA was performed, and user was able to. But here, so don't have any access. So that's one small example of MFA. Go there, create the policies. Create the policies as per your business requirement. For Key Vault, you have the options to define the access policies. Okay, placing this question for parking lot in a parking lot, and I'll talk about that on the day 3. Okay, we're gonna talk about Key Vault on day 3. Hold on, please. Save with your name. Okay, further thing, that's the privilege identity management, PIM. As I said, identity is a new security parameter. Identity is the one which we're gonna differentiate because we have been given common portals. We have a Office 365, we have Azure or any other application, cloud application. We have been given a common portal for that. Okay, so identity is the one which is going to differentiate the things for us. So let's talk about further things, what we can do to implement the security and to make sure right access has been given to. So PIM is the another feature. When we talk about PIM, it is not the identities, it is not the management, but it is actually the privilege. We know one thing that is called RBAC. Using RBAC, we grant the access based on the job they are offering, based on the job they are doing in the organization. But when we talk about this RBAC thing, let's say global administrator access is given to one user. That user gonna retain that access. And we know the things if any non-privileged or non-administrative identity is compromised, the user account is compromised, there might not be a significant damage as it will be in case of our privileged or administrative account is compromised. So using the robust PIM system we do have, we can determine who should have the administrative access, who should not have the administrative access to the critical systems. So ultimately we are protecting or we are getting the security for the identities, but when we say PIM, it focuses on the privilege. We define who should have the access and who should not have the administrative access. Okay. By using that, we can control the change configurations, means who should have the permission to install the software, who should have the permission to modify the account, and all that stuff we can do. Make sure, yes, the access is given for the specific time before and after, no access is given to. So, different things we have been given. Before that, we're going to talk about Zero Trust model, what it is, and then PIM. the feature and capabilities given there. Again, I'll refer the statement which I said initially. Corporate network is not a security perimeter anymore. Gone are the days when security was focused on a strong perimeter defense. As things are hosted outside of the corporate network, not on premises, then rather than corporate network, we focus on the security of identities, right? And we follow the approach which is called as zero trust model. When we talk about this zero trust model, it is based on a few security principles. What are those security principles? Actually, there are three security principles, three principles of zero trust model. One is assume breach. Means we need to segment the access by network, by the users, by the devices, applications. That's one principle followed under the concept of zero trust model. Verify explicitly means do not trust anything. Always authenticate, always authorize. And we're gonna authorize based on the available data points, like user identities, what location user is trying to log in, what device he or she is using, what service he or she is trying to access. So based on different data points, based on anomalies, based on the data classification, we authenticate, authorize. That is called verify explicitly. And we're gonna follow the RBAC approach. I said that time, least privilege access should be given. Means user should have the limited access. Not just the RBAC, along with that, JIT approach should be there. Just in time and just enough access approach should be used. We need to use the policies which can define just enough access and just in time access. Just enough access means users are able to accomplish the task or the job they are assigned to. There are 6 foundation pillars we follow these 3 principles. What those foundation pillars are? Start with the identities, which can be users, can be devices, can be the application. In Azure Active Directory, those can be managed identity as well. So whenever any identity try to access the application, it must be authenticated using the strong authentication. Further, devices are the one which can provide the attacking surface to the users. Right? Devices are the one which create the attacking surface because data flows from the devices to on-premises workload and clouds, right? So we need to monitor the health of that. We monitor the devices for the health or for the compliance. We check it out, that is, so whether those are as per the policies or not. Whatever the applications we do have, we need to make sure those are free from vulnerabilities. Microsoft did the study back in 2017 or 18. In that study, they claimed on an average, organizations, enterprise takes 99 days to find out the new security vulnerabilities, to find out the security threats. But if we talk about attacker hardly take 24 hours to 48 hours to get the full control on the domain, full control on the network. So need to make sure the applications we do have, those are free from vulnerabilities. Application actually define the way of data is being consumed. Sometimes user can use their own applications which are not sanctioned, which are not compliant as per the organization standard. If we see any application which is not compliant or which we do not know about, that can be the sign of shadow IT. So application is also something very important pillar. Data, ultimate goal is to protect the data. For that one, we have been given a Microsoft purview For the application, we have a Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Microsoft Defender for Cloud app. And one more pillar, that's the infrastructure. We have on-premises environment, we have cloud-based environment. Wherever the infra is, that always represent a threat vector. So we should assess the version, we should assess the configuration, we should assess the JID access given to network we do have, that should be segmented in a subnets. Okay, so these are the 6 foundation pillars where we try to follow the 3 principles. What those 3 principles are? Assume breach, least access is given, least privilege access, and always verify explicitly. These are the 3 principles followed for the 6 foundation pillars. We have the zero trust model. Okay. Identities, if we talk about, we had the ATTS solutions. In there, things used to be on premises. We used to deploy the DCs, multiple DCs for high availabilities purpose, load balancing purpose as well. Sometimes multiple regions or sites can be there, and those sites multiple DCs would be there. So if we talk about that traditional authentication method or identity management solution we have been given, there was no SSO, single sign-on present earlier, right? We used to have the identities on one centralized point. So that's upon capabilities we have been given. Lately, we came to Azure Active Directory, where we got some additional features in our cloud-based identities we talk about, which can be federated with on-premises solutions. So features we do have conditional access, identity protections. We can analyze what's going on. We can keep eyes on the user. Okay. Further, we can optimize this cloud-based identity solutions by using the features given in there, like less passwordless authentications, based on the user, based on the devices, location they are trying to log in, based on anomalies, we can define whether access should be given or should not be given. We want MFA enabled, MFA enforced, that all settings of the features can be developed. So identities we have been given on the cloud, we can optimize using different features. Finally, PIM. So we want there are users, a number of the users are there. By using the RBAC, we can grant the access, and even though we follow least access should be given, but whomsoever the access is given, that's gonna retain that access unless we revoke it, remove it manually. So what we want to minimize the number of the people who have the access of something which is critical, be it your information or the resource. By following this approach, by minimizing the number of the people with the administrative privilege, we can reduce the chance of malicious actor getting that access. Or it is impacting some sensitive resource we do have in our organization. But the problem is, if we talk about that all things, granting the access is not good thing, then simple answer can be there, then do not give the access. If we talk about the network security, the most secure computer system can be the one which is not connected with any network. Even removable devices are disabled with that. But that's not the practical approach. We cannot disconnect the devices. In a similar manner, we cannot have the user which have no access. As per the business requirement, we have to give the access. User need to carry the privileged operations in Active Directory, in an Office, in a Azure, or it can be any SaaS applications as well. So the problem with the administrative privilege, if we give them and that user identity is compromised, there can be a significant loss. The further problem is we cannot avoid granting the access to the users. We have to give them. So PIM is the one which makes sure, yes, we can give the access to the user, but we're going to give the access to the user for a specific time. That is called just-in-time privilege access. So we're gonna give the access to the users, privilege access, I mean to say, to the users for a specific time to the resources of Azure Active Directory. So that's a service available in Azure Active Directory, which help us to manage, control, which help us to keep eyes on the access, which is allowing user to manage the important resources in our organization. When we say resources, it can be Azure Active Directory, it can be Azure subscription, it can be your any other SaaS application like Office 365, Microsoft Intune, Salesforce, whatsoever the application are registered with. So we go with a time-based, and if it is required, we can go with a approval-based role activation as well. So that's gonna mitigate the issue we were facing, issue of excessive, unnecessary access. Sometimes there can be a misuse of the access permissions on the resources. So PIM is the guy which allows us to manage the risks, allows us to address the compliance and governance requirement. Go with that. As far as the scope is concerned, even when I talk about RBAC, scope was the important thing to define. That defines the boundary of the access. In a similar manner, when we say PIM, we need to define the access. So, what is the scope of the access, the PIM? What is the scope of that PIM? We can configure the PIM for Azure Active Directory role. Okay, you are aware with the hierarchy, Azure Active Directory, that gives us the tenant, and within the tenant, we have the downside of the hierarchy, which start with the root management group. Then there may be a management group, further subscriptions, resource group, and then resources. So for this particular portion, we're gonna have PIM for the role. We enable PIM for the roles, Azure ADs. For the downside of the hierarchy, rather than the role, we focus on the resources, Azure resources. Okay, whatsoever the resources are there. And we need to make sure that privileged, least access privilege is given. Means that gives the access to the user so that he, she, or it is able to accomplish the task. Nothing more access is given. So scope of the PIM is there are two. Azure AD role and your resources, the resources which you deployed in a downside of the hierarchy. Okay? For the global administrator, by default enabled. That's the first user who enabled the PIM. Fine. We may have a security administrators. There are some other privileged roles are there. We can grant the access to. Okay. So when a user who is active in a privileged role need a license, that premium P2 license, we can enable that, and we can enable the PIM feature for that. When PIM enabled, it's gonna make sure it's just right people have the right access for a specific time. Okay. Configurations, if we talk about how we set that stuff, we go in a Azure Active Directory privileged identity management. So search bar I talked about, that's the most like robust search bar. You go there and type privileged identity management. There you get the option of you'll get the option of Azure AD roles you need to enable. Then select the specific role. For this role, you want to have the PIM settings. Define the settings and then update it. Okay. If we talk about the time, as I said, like time-based access is given, so you can set the time. The access is given for 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, up to 24 hours. The user gonna request the access and they will be given the access for a specific time. Okay? Things start with the planning. We need to determine who's gonna have the access on, what user or the role need to enable that, who will be managed by PIM, then further gonna grant the access. Enable who is actually eligible for this particular admin role. Or that is the optional thing, we can go with approval based. Whenever any user request goes to his or her manager, when he approves that, then access should be given. As I said, we can keep eyes on the access given to, so we have always options to monitor the things. We have the consistent monitoring features, means we can monitor the privileged account users who is using that. We can enforce the restrict control for sharing the credentials and all that. Okay, so one feature. Further, governance, gonna talk about shared responsibility model, hierarchy you already know, RBAT. Just hold on. So, shared security responsibility model. I'm pretty sure you might have met with so many people who straightforward say cloud is not secure. Surprisingly, they do not talk about any if and but. They just say it, cloud is not secure, which is, I believe, not a fair thing. It is not actually correct. Because when we talk about security in a cloud, and not just security, even the reliability. Security and reliability, these are the two things which comes under shared responsibility model. Means something we are responsible for, something they are responsible for. When we say we, I'm talking about customer. Customer is responsible for something. The other part, that vendor is responsible for. Cloud vendor is responsible for. Here there may be a question, who's going to decide that? Who is responsible for what kind of the task or the job? That is based on category of the application or the solution we are using from cloud. Regardless of the vendor we talked about, all cloud vendor provide the services under three major categories, which are IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. When we talk about IaaS, any service which is categorized under IaaS, cloud vendor is responsible for giving the infra only. And in the name of infra, compute power will be given. I can say hypervisor, storage will be given, and network. So in the name of infra, these are the three things will be given. Rest of anything else we need to configure, need to set up in order to launch the application, in order to provide the applications, host the application. That is our responsibility. Okay, so any service, regardless of the vendor of that cloud, categorized under IaaS, cloud vendor will be responsible for this portion of it. The rest of everything, be it your operating system, be it your platform, be it your application further top of that, user accessibility, data accessibility, that everything has to be decided by customer. Anything categorized under PaaS, like example of IaaS is Azure Virtual Machine. Azure Virtual Machine is a service. What does it do? It allows us to create the VM. Okay. VMSS. Set of the VMs, set of the pool, I would say pool of the VMs, which are identically configured, load balanced VMs, which are configured for the scalability purpose. That's another service available in Azure, categorized under IaaS. So you're using this or this. You need to decide, you need to configure your application redundant, your operating system free from vulnerabilities, your operating system is optimized. That is not the job of Microsoft. right? Any platforms, any service which is categorized under PaaS, for an example, Azure DNS, app service, Key Vault, any of the service which is categorized under PaaS categories, cloud vendor is responsible for giving us the infra plus the platform. For an example, if you are going to host the DNS service on premises, we need a server first of all. That server can be physical or it can be virtual. On top of that, we need operating system. That can be Windows or it can be Linux as well. Further, we need a platform. What we are going to do? We are going to host the DNS service. So it can be DNS role or it can be bind package. Depend on operating system. If it is a Linux operating system, bind package is there. If it is a Windows machine, DNS role is there. And then further on top of that, we're gonna host the zone. And within the zone, we're gonna have the records. But if we see, this was the ultimate goal. We wanted to host the zone like virtual hands.in. And within there, we want to host the records. Using the records, it's gonna resolve the name into IP and it was work as well. DNS is not a magician which gonna do some kind of a magic and will let you know the IP of the server which you are trying to connect. It has the record or it may have the cache which is fetched from the parent Linux. So we wanted to host the zone which is a contiguous namespace. This was our ultimate goal, but we had to bear with the pain of managing the servers, operating system license, managing the operating system, doing optimizing it, platform management, that everything we did. And here I did not talk about high availability scalability. If I talk about that, there can be a number of the servers, number of the operating systems. Environment can be quite bulky. Our objective is to host the zone. Azure gives us the service which is known as Azure DNS. We go in there and host the zone directly. We do not know what operating system is being used in there, and we don't care. We do not know and we don't care. For an example, we all are using electricity at home. Do we care how it is being produced? Whether it is being produced by water energy, wind energy, or atomic energy? We do not know and we do not care. Have we set up a dam on river? Answer is no. Most of us may not have the commercials money to set up a dam on the river, permissions as well. But we all are using electricity because someone else has done that stuff for us. So, PaaS, we don't care what operating system is being used. What type of the servers are there? What platform is there? When we use DNS, we do not know whether it is a DNS role or it is a bind package. Because my concern is I should be able to create the zone virtualhands.in, Microsoft.com, Contoso.com, whatsoever.com, and within there I should be able to host the record. So that's a PaaS service. And when we go with a PaaS service, platform, infra, that will be the job, including the operating system of this. That will be the job of Microsoft. On top of that, we're gonna host our own service. Means managing the zone is our responsibility. Hosting or creating the record within there is our responsibility. Same goes for the SaaS as well. In case of SaaS, any service categorized under SaaS category, cloud vendor gonna provide us the application. For that, gonna manage the required platform, required operating system, infra, everything will be responsibility of Microsoft or whatsoever the vendor it is. And top of that, the application also means on top of the platform, application is also the job of the or responsibility of cloud vendor. But further, we're gonna decide how many users I need to give the access on. Where I need to host the data or the user accessibility is my job, our job. Okay, like for an example, Office 365. How many users I need to give the mail access? Even in a SaaS, we cannot get rid of the security. That's true when we say SaaS, cloud vendor is more responsible. But we are responsible for something, even in the case of SaaS. So shared security comes under the shared responsibility. Something we gonna make secure, something they gonna make secure. It is the application which we have installed on a Azure VM. And when we say VM, that's a IaaS service. It means Microsoft is responsible for giving the infra only. There is a bug in our operating system and we are cursing Microsoft for that, right? So we need to identify the responsibility. And like when things have the on-premises, we are responsible for each and everything, bottom to top. Further, we transfer the responsibility to cloud vendor, depend on the category of the service we are using. Reduce overhead, less control on the things. Sometimes control is the primary thing for us. We can go with the IaaS solutions. Sometimes we want to get rid of the overhead which we were facing at the time of managing the virtual machine. We can go with some other service. Like if I talk about DNS only, we can host the DNS on Azure VMs, the operating system, Windows or Linux operating system, and then further have the DNS role or bind package within. Rather than going with that approach, we can go with the Azure DNS as well. Hierarchy. Start with Azure Active Directory that gives us the tenant, and then within the tenant we have something which is called root management group. Writing management in a short, and then by default in a root management group we have a subscription. But we may have a multiple subscriptions which we are using for different purpose, for different department, for different environment. Like prod environment is one, dev environment is the another one, and what else? QA. Out of those 50, let's say 30 subscriptions are for prod. Maybe 15 are for dev environment. And other 5 we are using for QA. And the thing is, here I need to apply X policy, Y policy, Z policy. With the default approach we do have in there, X policy need to apply 30 times. Y policy need to apply 15 times. This Z policy need to apply 5 times. There is a user named as Bhaskar. And another user is there, Amir. We need to grant the permission of owner to this user, Amir, on all the subscriptions which are being used for production. We need to do it 30 times. Bhaskar, to all subscriptions which are actually for the dev, 15 times we need to configure that setting. Rather than going with this approach, we can have one more container in there that's totally optional, which is called management group. Create it as per your business requirement. For geographic locations, for particular department, for infra, you create it, you know your requirement. And then move the subscriptions accordingly. Like if I stick with this example, create 3 management group with the name of prod, dev and QA. All 30 subscription in a prod management group, 15 in a dev management group, 5 subscription in a QA. And X need to apply only one time on prod, Y policy only one time on dev, Z policy only one time on QA. We'll further inherit it to the child subscription we have. Can have a maximum 10,000 subscriptions in a one tenant. If you guys have gone through the concept of AZ-500, you know what resource group is. That's a container of resources. We create it to organize the resources. This is something mandatory. And we cannot have the resource group in a resource group. Means resource group cannot be nested. Here, management group is a container of subscription which can be nested as well. As you can see the diagram, we have one management group with the name of corporate IT, and within there is another management group with the name of production. Further, you may have another management group. So management group can be nested, including root, 7 level of the hierarchy we can have. Means 6 management groups we can create within the management group, including root, 7. So root management group, then corporate, then production, within the production EQS, then within the EQS HR department. So this way 6. Okay, and create it, define the policy, define the RBACs. Within the management group, we have a subscription. Within the subscription, we have a resource group. Resource group is also a container, but it is a container of your resources. We use it for the same purpose, whatever the purpose we were using management group for. To organize the resources in terms of RBAC, policies, whatsoever. Can create based on the region, can create based on the services we are deploying, can create based on the department, can create based on the environment, their production or QA. But mandatory to create. When we create the resource, we have to select the resource group. Either we create a new resource group or we select the existing one. Then within there we have the resources. Now, Azure policies, I'll come back to the Azure policies. Let me talk about RBAC. I believe this is not the first time we are reading about RBAC. Almost in all the applications we have this approach. We grant the access to the users. To the identities rather than user, I should say identities. Okay? We grant the access as per our business requirement. Very well. I said that there are 3 questions we answer. What, where, who or whom. Means what permission we are granting. And where we are granting, that's a scope. We are granting the access to users, to the device or the application. Right? These are the 3 things we answer. And alignment of answer of these 3 questions is called an assignment. There may be a different concept used in there. Okay, there may be a different concept or terminology used in these solutions, but this is what we generally define that. A scope is something which can be further discussed. It can be your Azure Active Directory. It can be your, what else? Your ARM. Azure Active Directory, where we have the role like the global administrators, application administrator, billing administrator, user administrators. Downside of the hierarchy is subscription or management group, where we have the permission of, we have the role of owner, contributor, reader, user access administrator, specific service contributor also we do have, like network contributor, storage contributor, key vault contributor, app service contributor, VM contributor. Okay, contributor is also full-fledged administrator of that particular service, but it does not have the permission to grant the access to the other users. While as owner have the permission to grant the access to the other users as well. Okay, we can say contributor plus user access administrator is equal to owner. Fine. There is one more that is called elevated access. Elevated access is like a veto power for global administrator. Global administrator does not have the access on the downside of the hierarchy by default, but it can enable that elevated access. Simple toggle button is there in Azure Active Directory properties. You go there, you have the yes or no options. On and off, you just enable them. By default, it is disabled because even the global administrator follow the approach least access. Okay, further thing, Azure policy. A service. Basically in Azure, whatever we discuss, that's a service. Azure is a collection of service. And if we talk about Azure policies at the first glance, Azure policy looks like a RBAC. Okay, Azure policy look like a RBAC at first glance, but actually it is not. The objective is totally different. When we say RBAC, it focuses on the user actions. Means what user can perform. As we have a deny assignment also nowadays, so what user cannot perform. But ultimately, it's going to focus on user action. While as Azure policy focus on attributes or properties of the resources or the object rather than user actions. We define RBAC for, if I talk about Azure only, management group. We define RBAC for subscription, for resource group, and for individual resource as well. While as if we talk about Azure policies, management group, and what else are your subscription, your resource group. We cannot define the policies for individual resources. There are 3 scopes of the policies. For RBAC, there are 4 scopes. By default, no access is given to the user. So explicit allowed approach we do have. If we need to grant the access, yeah, we're going to configure that. Azure policy is just opposite. If we have not defined any policy, if RBAC access is there, user can do anything. Let's say I have been given the permission of storage administrator, storage contributor actually. I can create a storage account with any SKU I want to go with. But explicitly, permission is defined if any user creating the storage account in a resource group 1, he or she has to go with a standard LRS SKU only. Even though I do have a full privilege as per RBAC to create the storage account, but I will be able to create the storage account in a RG1 with this SKU only, not anything else. So it is used to enforce the policies. That's a pillar that talk about the compliance and governance requirement. We can post that system. Okay, if I talk about the architecture, let me just go on a black screen for a while. I'll not take your more time. We have been given a different interface. Portal we do have, PowerShell we do have, Bash shell also we do have, other REST APIs interface also we do have. Depend on whatever the interface we are comfortable with, we can use that. Microsoft does not recommend, okay, we should go for this X task, go with the portal. For Y task, go with the PowerShell. No, nothing is like that. Whichever the interface we are comfortable with, we can use that. And regardless of interface we are using, we all land at the same place, which is known as cloud management layer. Here in Azure or in a Microsoft, we call it ARM, Azure Resource Management, Azure Resource Manager. Azure Resource Manager is cloud management layer. Sometimes I found people to mix up the terminology with the ARM and ARM template. I heard a lot of people to say, I do have 2 ARMs. Hey man, how you can have 2 ARMs? You have a ARM template, which is a file that can be JSON-based file or bicep file, where you have defined the certain resources that will be deployed. That's the one way to interact with the ARM. ARM is cloud management layer. So let's say we are creating a virtual machine. We will be connecting to this guy, cloud management layer. When we talk about VM, be it your cloud environment, be it your on-premises environment, it is kind of universal fact. When we create a VM, hypervisor must be there. Because VM is created on a hypervisor, whatever the hypervisor it is, Microsoft Hyper-V, or it can be a hypervisor from another vendor as well. But it has to be there. Question arises, do we have the access of the hypervisor when we create with the ARM? Answer is no. So kind of the contradiction. On one hand I'm saying hypervisor must be there. Another hand I said there is no hypervisor visible on ARM. Then how we are able to deploy the VM? Okay. So for that there is another concept used in there that is called resource provider. So here we initiate the request, or from PowerShell, Bash shell, we initiate the request. Request comes to this guy, ARM. We'll be able to initiate the request if we have the permission for the same. RBAC is there. Yes, it is there. We will be able to deploy the resources. We will be able to provision or deprovision the resources. We can deploy, we can deprovision the resources. So let's say I do have the permission to create the VM. ARM will receive that request and hand over the request to the resource provider, appropriate resource provider. And all of the resources can be hosted on Azure platform. So we have been given a different type of resource provider. In case of VM, Microsoft.compute is there. So this is the guy which will receive the request from ARM. But there is one more thing. Before handing over the request to resource provider, whatsoever the resource provider it is, be it your Microsoft.compute, be it your Microsoft storage, Microsoft.network, Microsoft.insight, whatever it is. Before handing over the request to the resource provider, because this is the guy which has the access on the backbone infra. Talk about the VM, this is the guy, Microsoft.compute is the guy which has the access on backbone hypervisor. We do not see them. It will be going in there, it will go in there and create the VM for us. But handing over the request, it's gonna check it out something which is called Azure policy. Is there any policy definition which is not compliant with the request? ARM never hand over that request to the resource provider. If resource provider does not get the request, it will not go to the backbone infra and will not deploy the resources for us. Okay, let's come back to the PPTs. So we talked about what Azure policy is. Azure policy is a service which is used to create, assign, and manage the policies. The policy which we create for the compliance and governance requirement. Okay? There is a FAQ. People ask the question, what is the difference between? So, scope, different approach. Means object is totally different. Azure policies is to define the attributes of the object we are deploying. RBAC used to define the action. User can take on those resources or on those objects. Role can be categorized in 2 categories, as I said earlier also. One is AD role, ARM role. But rather than ARM role, we call them now Azure roles. These roles further can be categorized in 2 categories, built-in and custom. Here as well, same story, built-in and custom. If I talk about the example of built-in AD roles, global administrator is one of them. application administrator, cloud application administrator, user administrator, billing administrator, security administrator. Here built-in role, owner, contributor, reader, user access administrator. In both cases, we can create the custom. Custom from scratch. Custom by cloning a custom role. Clone a custom role. Possible only when you have a premium license. Here we talk about custom, 3 ways to create custom. One is from scratch, means we select the permission, each and every permission on our own. Another option, we can clone any role, be it your built-in or custom, and we might have created a custom role earlier with a different scope, and at the end we save it as a JSON file. Now we can use that JSON file as well. So 3 ways to create a custom role for ARM. These are the built-in role: contributor, full-on administrator place, along with granting the access to the resources. Means we can manage the access to the resources as well. Contributor is the guy which has the full-on administrative privilege. Means can grant, can manage, can deploy, delete any resource. But contributor is the one which cannot grant the access to the other guys. User access administrator is just opposite. Can manage, can grant the access to anyone, but cannot deploy anything. If you ask to deploy any resource, no. But it can grant the access to deploy those resources to anyone, to himself or herself as well. A reader is the role which has the permission to view everything, but will not be able to do any kind of the changes. Other than that, we have a custom role as well. And yeah, I talked about contributor role, and number of the services are there. For specific services as well, we have a contributor role, like Sentinel contributor role, log analytic workspace, log analytic contributor role, VM contributor role, network storage contributor role. Okay, log is the resource, one more resource, which can be helpful to avoid the accidental deletion or unwanted modifications. You know, in an ARM, we deploy everything in a resource book. What if we accidentally delete the resource book? All the resources deployed within there will be deleted along with. So to prevent that, we have been given the options of lock. There are 2 types of the lock. One is read-only lock and delete lock. When we talk about delete lock, it will disable deletion only. Means we cannot delete something which is already deployed. But new provisioning is fine. We deploy new thing in there, new VM, new network, no problem. But right after creating that, we cannot delete it if the delete lock is there. When we say read-only lock is the one which disables both tasks. Neither we can deploy, nor we can delete. Forget about deletion. Even we cannot change the power state of the VM. We have the VM in a RG1 where we have a read-only lock. VM is powered on. If we want to power it off, no, we cannot. Or vice versa. So read-only lock, as its name suggests, make the resource group or subscription read-only. Will not be able to do any kind of changes. While as delete, just deletion is disabled, new provisioning is fine. Okay, one more service. Blueprint. What is that? So we know ARM template, a JSON-based file. Using that, number of the resources can be deployed. We know policy. Using that, we can define the statement to manage the compliance, or we can apply the governance restrictions. We have RBAC. Using that, we can grant the access. Will we grant the access? We grant the access on ARM in our resource groups. Blueprint is a high-level design of something. It allows us to sketch the design parameters, enable us to define the repeatable set of the resources. Along with that, it gives us the trust, yes, the resources we are deploying as per the organization standard, the pattern, the requirement they need. So make it possible for us to rapidly build and stand up the new environment. Along with the trust, yes, we're gonna have whatever we're gonna deploy, that we're gonna deploy as per the policies required. If I say it in a non-technical term, blueprint is the combined form of these all services we discuss. ARM template is one thing, policies, the Azure policy is another thing. We use it for compliance. RBAC we use to define the access, and within the RG we deploy the services. Using the blueprint, we can do everything in a one go. These are the policies will be applied to within this particular resource group. This resource group will be deployed, and these users will have the access on, and these are the resources will be deployed in that resource group. Everything in a one go. So help us to sketch the design parameters. As an architect, we can deploy the number of the resources, and we can make sure, yes, we are following the whatever the requirement in terms of compliance and governance restrictions. If we talk about subscription management, yes, we can transfer the ownerships, can define who's going to have the access on, what they will be able to perform, what kind of the role will be given to. That all job can be defined using different fields. So role-based access control and the resource role. Let me just give you the quick demo on that, and then you are free to do your lab. I'll not be able to deploy anything here because I don't have the subscriptions. Portal, big shit. Active Directory, creating one user account. User 2. User 2. Who am I right now? Big shift at virtual handstore. Two resource group are already there. RG1. Another resource group, RG2. I do have the access of both. Look at two RGs are there. I can see both, all four, because I do have the access on that. I can perform whatsoever I want to do in that. As per business requirement, we can grant the access to any subscription, any user, any resource group or any management group. Right now, I'm taking the example of resource group. Last time when user Rick was logged in, when Rick user logged in, he was not able to see anything because he was not given any access to. Right now, I'm going to grant the access on RG1 and granting the access of network contributor to the user named as user1 or user2, sorry. Done. RG's resource groups are visible. When that user 2 will log in here, will not be able to see other RGs except the one where he has been given the access on. See that. Welcome page is different this time. Not asking to purchase subscription. Let's go in a resource group. Only one RG is used. No RG2, no network virtual RGs. And here in this RG, let me just create a storage account. Who am I right now? User 2. Pascal storage 20 29. See that. Final validation is going on, and here is a error message. Why? Authorization failed. This user 2 is not authorized to perform this task, does not have the permission, because we granted him a permission to create the network. What I'm trying to do, trying to create a storage, so this is why error is there. But if I go and create the network, there is no problem with that. RG is 1, VNet. Let's not discuss the other settings of network. I'm gonna do it tomorrow. And see that validation is passed. Do that. Right? In some time, there will be a network in a RG1. Another thing is, if I delete this, like see here, RG2, whatever we do have in there, will be able to, that also will be deleted along with. Define the name of RGs, and then done. See? So to avoid the accidental deletions and all that stuff, we have been given one more resource that is called resource lock. If we apply that resource lock, can avoid the accidental deletions. As I said, there are two types of the resource lock. One is delete lock. Another one is a read-only lock. So I applied delete lock on it. It means new provisioning is fine. I'll go in a VNet. If deploy a VNet in there on any other resource, I'll be able to do that. Deploying VNet because that can be deployed quickly. RG1 and VNet 11. No problem. Here, deploy that. And deploying and sometime it will be there. So new provision is fine. But at the same time, if I try to delete this one, see here, two resources are there. VNet 1 and VNet 11. RG1. See, error is there. Gives the error. Cannot delete the resource. What about the VNet I created within? not even a VNet. Error is there. Okay, there is another lock. We have been given another type of the lock that is called read-only lock. If read-only lock is there, we will not be able to do any kind of the change in that, in the scope of that lock. Wow, it says no lock. Okay, the beauty is we can change the lock type as and when required, delete to our read-only to delete. So if I change it to read-only now, earlier it was delete. Now it's some time, and then deploy one more network in there, VNet 22. See RG1. I should see the error here. No problem, let's go and deploy that. VNet 22 here. See, validation failed, and reason why? Cannot perform right operation because the scope you are trying to create a VNet, that is locked. So even new provisioning is disabled. You cannot delete, you can deploy, cannot deploy anything in there. But in case of delete, you can deploy, you can go with the new provisioning. Whatever is already in there, you cannot delete that. Done. Let me know if there is any question. You can show the question, and you can further proceed for the lab part. Yes, Amir, over to you.
All right, guys. All right. What a day. I am so proud of you. So you must be proud of yourselves too, because we've learned so much today. So a quick vote now. Do you want a break right now, or do you want to little bit know about the labs and then go for a break? So it's a democratic vote. So I'll leave it to you. So a quick break now, or do you want to know a bit about the labs and then go for a break? I'll put a vote. Okay. All right. Getting a lot about. Okay. So it's basically 1-1 at the minute. Let's break that tie. Come on. Know about the labs and then take a break? Okay. Awesome. Okay, it's not helping, guys. It's 2-2. So I don't want everyone to participate right now. Okay. Oh, God. All right. I'm going to take over the screen first. Okay, a lot of people are saying a little bit about the lab. Let's create a poll. Okay, I'm cool with that. I'll create a small poll. That's good. I should have done that before. Labs or break? Just option 1, labs, break. Okay, I've launched a new poll, and I know you've already given the answer, but let's do a quick one so that I don't have to count manually. Just a quick one, and whatever you do, I agree to that. If it's a tiebreaker, then my decision wins. Okay. Come on, we are around 40 people today, which is just a lot of people. 50-50. Okay, I'll put a minute more. So at 2:16, I'm going to make that decision. So just a minute more. By the way, parallelly, if you have any questions, any tech questions, just pop it in the chat or come off mute. Okay, so 52% are saying break, so I have to agree with the majority. Just 17 responses. Anyone else? Okay, it's 2:16 now. That's it. So we go for a break. What we'll do is go for a quick break. You cannot vote, Sean. So what was your vote? We'll go for a quick break. That's okay. So we'll just go for like a 15-minute maybe. So we'll go for a 15-minute break. I know it's a lot to download and it's okay. So we'll go for a 15-minute break and come back. And yeah, let's talk about labs. Okay, awesome. In the meantime, if there are any doubts, you can come off mute and ask us anything you feel like. Anything, absolutely anything. No questions? Okay. When we come back, we talk about the labs.
Hey, I have a question about the lab.
Yeah.
I tried many times trying to get the lab. I'm getting